We saw a wave of coups in African countries, including Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Gabon, and Guinea. Interestingly, these are the very countries exporting most of their raw materials and natural resources to European countries. Their corrupt leaders struck deals with foreign companies, allowing them to exploit and plunder the resources in return for personal gains. That's why the properties and assets of those leaders swelled in France, but the resources in their home countries were depleted. Yes, they sold their loyalty. Military leaders could not see that, so they staged coups, and now they have taken control of their resources. Until now, the West, including the US, was calling these military takeovers as coups, which meant they were illegal. But guess what? Recently, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, clearly said that African countries should benefit from their resources and the West should not count the African resources as its own. He openly supported the coup leaders in their fight to claim their natural resources, but he went even further and gave clear warnings, besides revealing his ultimate plan. What was his plan? What did he say? And whether it meant he had joined the coup leaders? Let's find that out in this video. In various instances this year, the South African president has shown what he is thinking about. Whether he was at the United Nations General Assembly or at a conference of the African countries, his message was clear. Africa will not allow its resource exploitation. At the United Nations General Assembly, he declared that centuries after the end of the slave trade, decades after the end of the colonial exploitation of Africa's resources, the people of the African continent are once again bearing the cost of the industrialization and development of the wealthy nations of the world. But this won't continue any longer. Again, addressing the opening ceremony of the 20th AGOA Forum just recently at the Johannesburg Expo Center, he further explained what he is planning. He knew the U.S. trade representatives were present there, and he wanted them to listen to his words loud and clear. He said that Africa possesses significant reserves of crucial minerals and has a vibrant and youthful population, substantial urban development, and an increasingly interconnected society. He continued and said that African nations are fully committed to fostering industrial growth within their economies. By advancing along the value chain, they aim to create more job opportunities, enhance the value generated within the African continent, and improve the lives of more than 1.3 billion individuals. His message was more than clear that now, African countries are thinking of benefiting from their resources instead of handing them over to other countries. For that, they will together create a supply chain and invest in sectors so finished products can be manufactured. Ramaphosa said that while Africa serves as a vital source of essential raw materials, our vision extends beyond being recognized solely as producers of basic commodities. The true potential for industrialization lies in the conversion of minerals and metals into sophisticated industrial and consumer goods that have a global demand. In other words, instead of exporting lithium in its raw form, he wants to manufacture batteries that power the green revolution. The same is true for every resource and raw material that African nations export, but that can be converted into consumer goods, bringing more revenues. Ramaphosa said that Africa eagerly looks forward to partnering with the United States and other countries to promote an investment-oriented strategy. This will be done to diversify the international supply chains of critical minerals by processing these resources within Africa. Yes, Africa won't hand raw materials to Europe so it can produce finished goods and sell them to Africa. Rather, this time, it will be the opposite. Africa will manufacture consumer goods, and Europe has to buy them. Although AGOA's unilateral trade preferences have yielded economic benefits for several countries in sub-Saharan Africa, the full potential of AGOA remains largely untapped. Ramaphosa said that an early renewal and reauthorization of AGOA, coupled with reforms aimed at expanding the range of eligible products and simplifying access for small and medium-sized businesses, can maximize the impact of this legislation. Later, Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized the need for African nations to independently chart their foreign policy courses, free from the influence of global powers or blocs. He highlighted that African nations are actively shaping their own futures, hinting toward the coups. and exploring ways to utilize that Africa possesses abundant minerals yet primarily serves as a source of raw materials. President Ramaphosa emphasized the necessity for the continent to focus on exporting finished, value-added products. For that, Africa has to invest in domestic industries, allowing new sectors to emerge. Whatever he said is right because the African continent is rich in natural resources. Europe, which has almost no natural resources, has leveraged African resources, and the prosperity it has gained is hidden from no one. Africa is abundant in a variety of natural resources, such as diamonds, sugar, salt, gold, iron, cobalt, uranium, copper, and cocoa beans. Furthermore, the continent boasts ample supplies of tropical timber, tropical fruit, and significant reserves of petroleum. Recent discoveries of oil reserves have further emphasized the importance of this commodity for African economies. Sudan and Nigeria prominently feature among the leading oil producers, with the United States and European countries primarily utilizing the oil production of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In total, Africa has about 125.3 billion barrels of oil reserves, compared to the US, 44 billion barrels. Nigeria, Libya, Algeria, Egypt, and Angola lead Africa's upstream oil production, with other countries like Gabon, the DRC, Cameroon, Tunisia, Equatorial Guinea, the Republic of the Congo, Ivory Coast, and more recently, Ghana, also contributing to the industry. Exploration efforts in various countries aim to increase production or establish themselves as first-time producers. But oil isn't the only resource. Africa has one of the largest mineral resource reserves. It has 30% of the world's remaining mineral reserves, with 57% of its export earnings stemming from hydrocarbons. Africa is renowned for its rich copper belt in Haut-Katanga province and diamond mines in Sierra Leone, Angola, and Botswana. Yet these resources never offered benefits to the people of Africa. Throughout history, Africa encountered colonization and exploitation by non-African nations, leading to external pressures and the scourge of raw materials predicament. This situation has potentially contributed to conflicts and hindered development. The continued exploitation of Africa's natural resources by countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, France, the United Kingdom, and China has resulted in the flow of resource value to these external powers rather than remaining within Africa, exacerbating poverty despite the continent's wealth of resources. What's more, Africa hosts nearly half of the world's gold and one-third of all minerals globally. Underneath the surface of Africa lies a wealth of mineral resources with tremendous value. In 2019, the continent produced nearly 1 billion tons of minerals worth $406 billion. According to the United Nations, Africa houses around 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 12% of the global oil, and 8% of the world's natural gas reserves. Moreover, the continent holds 40% of the world's gold and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum, both of which are highly prized metals. It's surprising to know that all metals and minerals required to manufacture smartphones are found in Africa. However, there is no African smartphone company that can generate revenue from this. The majority of the electronic devices we rely on today depend on various minerals, including aluminum and zinc. In 2021, approximately 1.5 billion smartphones were sold worldwide, marking a significant increase from 122 million units in 2007. As of 2020, nearly 4 out of 5 individuals, 78%, owned a smartphone. Nearly more than half of a mobile phone's components, such as its electronics, display, battery, and speakers, are made from mined and partially processed materials. Essential metals like lithium and cobalt are crucial for battery production. In 2019, about 63% of the world's cobalt production originated from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Tantalum is another essential metal used in electronic equipment. Tantalum capacitors are found in mobile phones, laptops, and various automotive electronics. The Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda are the primary global producers of tantalum, collectively contributing to half of the world's tantalum production. But instead of making the majority of revenue, it just gets a fraction of the total revenue generated by multinational and multi-billion-dollar companies. Petroleum and coal are among the most abundant minerals in 22 out of Africa's 54 countries. As of 2019, Nigeria led the continent in petroleum production, followed by Angola and Algeria. Metals such as gold, iron, titanium, zinc, and copper are the most produced minerals in 11 countries. Industrial minerals like diamonds, gypsum, salt, sulfur, and phosphates were the primary commodities for 13 African countries. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is Africa's largest industrial diamond producer, followed by Botswana and South Africa. Botswana ranks as the leading producer of gem-quality diamonds in Africa, commonly used for jewelry. South Africa leads the pack, generating the highest revenue from its mineral resources at $125 billion annually. Nigeria secures the second spot with $53 billion, followed by Algeria at $39 billion, Angola at $32 billion, and Libya at $27 billion. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. But the problem is that instead of exporting finished products made from these raw materials, African countries simply export raw materials. This resulted in a significant loss of revenue that could have been earned if these raw materials were used wisely. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed conveyed his optimism about Africa's potential to emerge as a powerful force in economics, politics, and society by efficiently utilizing its plentiful natural resources and demographic strengths. Sim Tshabalala, the CEO of South Africa's Standard Bank Group, authored an opinion piece for a local media outlet, emphasizing that African nations have the right and responsibility to harness their natural resources and develop their economies for the betterment of their people. Tshabalala underscored the vital use of these resources to bolster agricultural growth and facilitate effective urban planning across the continent. In this context, he strongly criticized the approach that hinders African nations from utilizing non-renewable resources for development. He said that the suggestion that the most impoverished African nations should be prevented by externally imposed regulations from harnessing their non-renewable resources raises questions about the stance of these individuals on human rights and human development. The CEO emphasized that the poorest countries should have the capacity to borrow and invest in various forms of energy generation and industrialization. He also highlighted that Standard Bank supports the inclusion of transition fuels, like natural gas, as a significant element for middle and high-income countries in their pursuit of achieving a net-zero economy. A recent report from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development UNCTAD emphasized the importance of African nations not solely depending on the export of their raw minerals, despite their abundance in critical metals for batteries and electric vehicles. According to the report published on August 16, Rebecca Grinspan, the Secretary General of UNCTAD, stressed the need for African countries to avoid being limited to providing raw materials only. This could lead to minimal integration into global supply chains. A growing number of lawmakers in various African nations are acknowledging the need to regulate their mineral resources. Namibia and Zimbabwe have recently taken measures to restrict the export of unprocessed mineral ore. Also, Ghana's Minister of Land and Natural Resources, Samuel Jinapor, confirmed the country's commitment to refraining from exporting lithium and other green minerals in their raw form, aligning with President Akufo-Addo's objective to capture additional value. The UNCTAD report highlights the potential of African countries to become primary suppliers of automotive parts and components, considering the significant reserves of global cobalt, manganese, phosphate rock, and platinum group metals on the continent. Grinspan stressed the importance of fair mining contracts and policies that encourage strong connections between large-scale mining and local industrial development for African countries to participate effectively in high-value global supply chains. The report suggests that African nations establish agreements with automotive and battery manufacturers to gain access to technology and knowledge while also focusing on domestic processing. That will be a genius strategy. Until African countries learn how they should exploit the resources on their own, they should make agreements with companies that will train the local force. It also proposes the introduction of national incentives and regional collaboration to give local companies preferential access to specific portions of mining products that must be utilized or transformed locally. It will be like drawing inspiration from the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. Moreover, the report advocates for the creation of new mechanisms for vehicle financing to stimulate domestic demand for automobiles and the consolidation of automotive production through special economic zones and industrial parks. Notably, a battery special economic zone centered on the production of battery precursors, batteries and EVs, was recently initiated between Congo and Zambia, with the support of the African Export-Import Bank and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. The report stresses the need to support African nations in their negotiations of mining contracts to ensure fair value from extractive industries. The continuous reliance on the export of raw materials has been identified as a key factor contributing to structural weaknesses in African economies. This has prompted experts to consistently advocate for value addition as a means of reducing poverty, enhancing economic resilience, curbing unemployment, and addressing social inequality on the continent. Another study has been done which examined sub-Saharan Africa's raw material footprint over the past 2 decades. It reveals a near doubling of production and consumption levels between 1995 and 2015. Across various material categories, such as biomass, construction materials, fossil fuels, and ores, Africa demonstrated a net export of raw material footprints. This study highlighted a significant 53% rise in raw material equivalents of exports, increasing from 1.95 gigatons in 1995 to 298 gigatons in 2015, underlining a substantial surge in the continent's raw material exports. Notably, several African nations, including South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Algeria, Angola, and Ethiopia, witnessed notable growth in the raw material equivalents of their exports during this period. The report also highlighted Africa's considerable natural wealth, consisting of roughly 8% of the Earth's natural gas reserves, a third of global mineral reserves, and a tenth of the world's oil reserves located within the continent. Yet, despite these riches, Africa remains home to some of the most impoverished nations globally. Well, some African countries are trying to take control by banning raw material exports, and this has proven to be very effective. On July 27th, Ghana's cabinet decided to ban the export of unprocessed minerals like lithium, following the trend of several other African nations taking similar measures as part of a collective strategy to maximize returns from their natural resources. Ghana's new policy, expected to be enacted into law by the end of 2023, aims to retain a significant proportion of the value chain before a product is rolled out for export, as stated by the country's Minister of Land and Natural Resources, Samuel A. Jinapor. Namibia's cabinet made a policy decision based on the same principle a month before Ghana, albeit with some flexibility. In December 2022, Zimbabwe also took a similar step concerning the export of unprocessed lithium. A circular issued by the Southern African country's Ministry of Mines and Mining Development stated that the move aimed to realize President Emerson Mnangagwa's vision of seeing the country become an upper-middle-income economy. The alignment of African countries rich in minerals like lithium, a crucial component of batteries, with the shift towards green technology in developed countries, is not coincidental. This has prompted major automakers to focus on electric vehicles. For instance, the UK decided years ago to prohibit the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030, while the European Union's ban on the sale of new cars that emit CO2 will take effect by 2035. Some companies have already set dates for ceasing the production of internal combustion engines, concentrating solely on electric vehicles powered by energy-efficient batteries. In addition to lithium, these batteries require cobalt, a metal abundant in Africa. Now, as African countries know that they hold the resources that will make the future, they are taking control in their hands. This is something that has to be appreciated. What the South African president and the leaders will do next will literally blow Europe's mind. From now on, African nations will utilize their rich natural resources to boost revenues by concentrating on creating finished goods. This not only enhances the value of these resources, but also contributes to the overall economic growth and diversification of these countries. First, a strong industrial infrastructure will be built for processing raw materials within the country. This involves establishing processing plants, factories, and manufacturing units that can effectively convert raw materials into finished products. Then, African countries will partner with technologically advanced countries and companies that can facilitate the exchange of knowledge and technology. This collaboration can enhance the production capabilities of African nations and drive innovation in manufacturing processes. The next step will be value addition, which involves processing raw materials to create high-value products with significant market demand. This includes refining raw minerals, agricultural produce, and natural resources into consumer goods, machinery, or other high-value products. At the same time, heavy investment in education and training for the workforce will be made. It's because offering specialized training programs and skill development initiatives can cultivate a skilled labor force capable of effectively managing complex manufacturing processes. African countries will ensure that financial support and access to capital for local entrepreneurs and businesses is provided to encourage the establishment and growth of industries involved in processing and manufacturing natural resources. African nations will engage in regional and international trade agreements that will simplify the export of finished products to global markets. Such agreements will provide access to larger consumer bases and create opportunities for increased trade and revenue generation. In the next step, the product range will be diversified. This will be done by investing in research and development to expand the variety of products that can help create a wide range of finished goods. Diversification can reduce dependence on a single commodity and minimize the impact of market fluctuations. Now, African countries are ready to turn the tables, and we will soon see its fruits. Whether we are talking about democratic leaders or the ones who came after the coup, all of them are focused on making Africa great by ending raw material exports and manufacturing finished products. What do you think? Should all African leaders join hands and become united against African resource exploitation? Isn't it true that now, Europe will face difficulties as more African countries under democratic and coup leaders are joining forces? Let us know your thoughts on what can happen next and what the response from the West will be. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.